When the union's inspiration through the workers' blood shall run, there shall be no power greater anywhere beneath the sun. For what force on earth is weaker than the feeble strength of one? For the union makes us strong. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever, ever. We the workers built the land with our blood, sweat, and tears. Ones who tilled the soil, ones who grind the gears. It is we who plow the prairies under the summer sun. We walk a life of work and the journey's never done. Built the cities where we live, connected bricks to mortar. The structure is the people and the shoulder touch the shoulder. The burden gets shouldered certainly. Soldiers 9 to 5 side by side, surviving on Folgers. Our hands hold the powder greater than the house of gold. Greater than the might of armies magnified 1,000-fold. Bringing forth a new world from the ashes of the old. The union is a merger of the workers brave and bold. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Ever, 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 ever. Oh, oh, oh. So this is the part of the show where I often play a song by my guests if they're a singer-songwriter. And I've had rappers on the show before, but usually there are rappers that are kind of part-time singers like Oscar Lewis and Silk Prince. So today's guest, Mohammad Ali, aka the Socialist Vocalist, sort of aka Socialist Hip-Hop. He pretty much just does rap, so today I really had to force myself to go into that genre and learn how hard it is to articulate some of your words when you're going that fast. I'm very excited about today's guest. You know, I'm someone who's always liked the idea of writing protest songs. Phil Oakes, whose record I have up on the wall there today, is one of my absolute heroes. Some of his songs, I Ain't Marching Anymore, Love Me, I'm a Liberal, The War is Over, The Marines Are Landing on the Shores of Santo Domingo, so many others that I'm not coming up with that at the snap of a finger. They're so insightful, such great jabs at both American conservatives and American liberals. He was a real principled leftist of the 60s, a great artist. But it's not natural to write songs like that. For me, a song has to come into my head and sound catchy. And often those songs that happen to do that are not the kind of songs that change the world. But my next guest, he's a real presence on the Toronto protest scene. He's really involved in the labor movement and possibly some other movements. I'm going to get to know him a bit over the course of this interview, but it just seems like there's really so much to know. But the point is, if you want to listen to someone who does protest music that's really great, really well informed, check out Mohammad Ali's music. And now, check out my interview. So I'm joined today, though, how about you tell me how to introduce yourself? I've never been sure if it's Mohammad Ali or you actually use Socialist Hip-Hop as a name.
Yeah, so Mohammad Ali, the Socialist Vocalist. The imprint is Socialist Hip-Hop, but the artist's name is Mohammad Ali, the Socialist Vocalist.
All right. And for my audience, which is more of a musical one than a sectarian Marxist one, can you tell me what socialist means to you?
Okay, so to me, socialist means being a revolutionary, fighting for a better society, a better world as possible, and trying to make that happen by working together in organizing collectively. And I became a socialist in, I would say, 2005, but really like 2006 when I started putting out my first album and really started becoming an organizer, community activist, student activist, artist activist. And that's when I came up with socialist hip hop, because socialism was new to me at the time. And right away, by 2007, I realized most people don't know, I've never heard the word socialist, and I might have to rebrand myself. And ironically, in 2008, Barack Obama ran for the president, and people on Fox News started calling him a socialist, which brought the word into the lexicon. And then people started knowing what the word socialist is because Fox News was attacking Obama. But if it wasn't for that, I would have had to change the name like 12 years ago. But luckily, Fox News is there, I guess. But yeah, but no, socialists is really trying to change the world by working collectively, fighting climate change, fighting racism, fighting gender violence, and really trying to make a more equitable society for everyone.
Right. So I guess a lot of people will talk about a big moment that maybe came later. For some people, it was Occupy. For some people, it's the Sanders campaign. But it's just really meeting other activists, and that's the philosophy they describe themselves with.
Yeah, I guess for me, it was a bit of a transition. Like it was at first, I was reading Che Guevara and Noam Chomsky, a lot of Che's diaries, because Che fought in the Cuban Revolution, in revolutions in Africa, in South America, and he was a really captivating writer in his diaries, right? Like you felt like you were reading a movie, and it made me really want to see Cuba, because the Cuban diaries were the first one that I read and captivated me the most. So but before I did that, I wanted to see my own country. So I went across Canada and I traveled across Canada. But then and I got to see a lot of different parts of Canada, being from the GTA, being from Toronto. Sometimes you're a bit of a bubble. So even though I traveled a little bit, that gave me a real chance to really go all the way out east, go all the way out west, and then going to Cuba. And seeing how like people live differently in Cuba, the approach to life, the fact that intergenerational friends is a normal thing. I have friends who are 20, I had friends who were 65. We would just get together, play some music, have lunch together. It was a very community focused, a lot of camaraderie among the people. At the same time, I'm still reading these books, and then I started getting introduced to socialist ideas among socialist organizations. And then when I stopped traveling to Cuba, because I've been like 4 times over 2 years, practically lived there. Then I got involved with the War Resisters campaign, because folks were like, it's great having coffee, it's great having dinner and talking politics, but as socialists, we don't just talk about this stuff. We're actually trying to make the change that we want to see. So I got involved in the anti-war campaign, supporting U.S. soldiers that were against the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, and also the at the time brand new Canada-Haiti Solidarity Network, right away, I noticed in both campaigns, they were very strong, lots of veteran activists, and I was brand new, had no idea what I was doing. So one thing I started doing, in my mid-20s, was organizing on campus. So I started a Haiti Solidarity group and an anti-war group at Ryerson University, because I was like, we can reach out to youth a bit more. But then the second thing that I did was try to make music. So I started making music in Cuba because all my friends that I lived with were performing artists. I had no clue what I was doing. But then to raise money and awareness for both campaigns. With Haiti, we were directly supporting a school that gave access to education to some of the poorest kids in Port-au-Prince. And for the War Resisters, was covering the legal bills and the material costs, but also putting that lobby pressure on the government to let the War Resisters stay. And also, in terms of Haiti, putting the pressure on the government to stop meddling in Haitian affairs, like the Canadian government was known to do, especially at that time. So then I'm like, let's make some music to educate young people and go campus to campus. Pub night, we build it as a pub night and a rap show. But before the music starts, the first thing you do is you get one of the soldiers to go out and speak about what it's like to actually be in Iraq. And I'm telling you, you'd have 100 people there, like Guelph, Trent, Wilfrid Laurier, Carlton, and people were packed in to hear some rap music and have some drinks. And when the soldiers talked, whoever it was, doesn't matter who it was Chris, Adam, you could hear a pin drop. Like every single person, like you could hear the sound of somebody taking a sip of their beer, because everybody was so focused and listened. And then after that, we'd have the music, raise some funds, get some petitions signed. And I did that across Canada. And that's how I became an artist, but it's also how I became a socialist.
Right. Okay. So there's a lot of detail there. I haven't had too much connection, I suppose, with the War Resisters. The one thing that struck me the one time I went to what I assume was an event from the same organization, it was these 3 soldiers who'd been, I don't know if it was Afghanistan or Iraq, but one would have to think, to go into the army in the first place, these would have to be at least somewhat conservative people. But now they were all openly saying, I'm an anarchist, I'm a communist. Like that experience, like pushed them in the opposite direction from where they were.
One thing that, so Daryl, actually, so the album, like the idea for the album specifically started with Dale Anderson, who he had gotten a Purple Heart saving other soldiers' lives when an IED went off. And, you know, he was the first war resistor to come to Canada. He made a song with these folks in Montreal called Die for Your War. And then he was like, you know, I'm from the States. I want to do an English version of the song. I want to do this with you, like you rap. And you know, I mean, so we got down on the song, the remix. The remix turned into an album, but and he talks a lot on the album when he went through, not just raps about it. But one of the things that he said to me that's always stuck with me was that what happens to you in boot camp, or at least what happened to them at the time, him and you know the people around him. He's like, no, like I see this kid just like freaked out, just boom, pop, 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 pop. You know, I mean, shooting at civilians. That is not the kid I met in boot camp. That was a kid who loved skateboarding. He just needed a job, needed money, joined the army. That is like, but what happens to you when you go through boot camp from the beginning to the end, according to Daryl, is that changes people's minds, and that's what I heard a lot. It wasn't that you know people are super conservative. It was that the indoctrination that takes place before you get sent overseas really changes people and makes them, you know, somebody they're not.
Right. So another thing, you talked about reading Che. The most recent song I believe you have a music video for is Daughters of Assata. And so you name drop 4 heroes in that song: Assata Shakur, Mumia Abu-Jamal, Nelson Madiba Mandela, and Che Guevara. Could you talk about the choice of those 4 figures?
So that started, that was the first song I actually wrote that ended up on the album. It started years before, and it was when Nelson Mandela had passed away. I started writing that piece, and then I continued writing it when Charles Roach, a big anti-racist activist in Toronto and Canada, passed away as well. Like both heroes of mine. I'm born in Mauritius, which is a little island off the coast of Madagascar. So hop, skip, and a jump away from South Africa. You know, when we were kids growing up, they had the Shaka Zulu miniseries on TV, and the entire island was, you know, watching that episode, like families around the TV set. We really looked to South Africa as a beacon of hope, right? Especially the anti-colonial work that has taken place in South Africa. So yeah, when Nelson Mandela passed away, that really, you know, brought a lot out of me, and I started writing. And the song is really about the intergenerational aspect, and that's where, you know, like Charles Roach comes into it, right? He did so much work with Black Legal Defense Committee, and then it's like, here I am, up and coming, hoping to be that next generation of anti-racist activists, but it's the same story, right? So be it, you know, if you're a fan of Malcolm X, Che Guevara, Angela Davis, or you're a fan of Public Enemy, Rage Against the Machine, it's the same story. And that's kind of was the focus of the song, right? It's like, hey, you know, just because we don't know everything that was said by Martin Luther King, that you know, was said by Karl Marx, doesn't mean we don't know how to do this work, because, you know, Zach De La Roca from Rage, Chuck D from Public Enemy taught us the way that Lenin may have taught you. And it's an intergenerational conversation, but also, you know, mentioning to the youth of like, yo, there's a history here. We're fighting this fight, but this fight has been happening before we were born, and we got to respect our elders as well. So that's where it kind of comes from, because those were some of my influences as an activist. But then at the end of the song, you know, I think I say, Chuck D, KRS, we charred these albums. For my generation, those are the new Martin and Malcolms. Lessons time tested like sundial shadow makers. That's why we don't trust in no mule or no 40 shallow acres, right? Just like the fight to end slavery, when, you know, American slaves were given 40 acres and a mule. There were leaders and heroes like Frederick Douglass back then. Our heroes today, you know, are Kendrick Lamar and J. Cole.
What's interesting is, so Mandela has sort of been accepted as this mainstream figure that everyone who either, you know, genuinely would have sided with him at the time, or who wouldn't because, you know, they're liberal, conservative, or whatever, they embrace him. Probably back in 2017, the other 3 would have counted as controversial. I don't know if, as someone who's probably paid attention to discourse around Assata Shakur and Mumia Abu-Jamal, whether you think the fight for justice for them, for their exoneration, has become more mainstream too, or how you feel about that.
No, I don't think it's I don't think Mumia is mainstream. I don't think Mumia is ever going to be mainstream. And I think Mumia, you know, like that's the way he wants it. He wants to keep it real, and you know, and I think when I think about stuff like that, I think about like the rewriting of history, right? The rewriting of Martin Luther King as, you know, as a pacifist liberal. Martin Luther King was a pacifist, but he definitely was not a liberal, right? The last major speech he gave, or one of the last major speeches he gave before he was assassinated, was called "Why Oppose the War in Vietnam," and he calls out U.S. capitalism. He calls out the government, calls out the ruling power structures. And if you read that on paper and you don't see who wrote it, you would thought it was Malcolm X, right? And vice versa. Malcolm X, before he was assassinated, took a very different approach with, specifically in terms of, more Rainbow Coalition type anti-racism work of taking, people from all races, not just focusing on Black power, but also working with socialist organizations, speaking and trying to build roots with that. He was reaching out to Martin Luther King many times. When Martin Luther King spoke at Congress, Malcolm went there in the hallways and waited to try to get a talk with Martin specifically to apologize to him for the stuff he had said about him. But they don't teach us that about Malcolm X, that he was out there trying to apologize to Martin Luther King and rebuild that bridge, that he was working with white people, he was working with socialists, that he was working with radicals, because he's dead, so it's much easier to rewrite that narrative. Same thing with Martin Luther King. He wasn't that radical. Yes, he was. Martin Luther King was about it. You know what I'm saying? Like, he was
Right.
that guy. But they rewrite the history. And with Mumia, you can't do that because Mumia would never let you do that. But I think part of that reason is because he's still here. I could easily see Mumia's history being rewritten 20 years from now. And I think, like, to me, that's the thing I take away always, that like this history that's presented to us, and then you come to find out the real history. I think Abraham, I was just talking about this with my partner Robin, my fiance, the other day, because it was July 4th, and we're talking about Frederick Douglass, because I love his, what it means to be his 4th of July speech. I think PBS has it online, narrated by James Earl Jones. Highly recommend that. Every July 4th, I listen to, Frederick Douglass's 4th of July speech, talking about anti-racism. And one thing I was saying to my fiance was, it's really interesting that people think of Abraham Lincoln as this great emancipator, but they look at John Brown as this crazy person who was a religious fanatic. When the reality is, John Brown was the emancipator. He was the person that planted that flag in the ground, being like, we are here for abolition and we're not going to stop, and that inspired people. It was not Abraham Lincoln, even though he gets the credit for that in history. The reality is, Abraham Lincoln is quoted as saying, "Are you crazy? I would never have Black people equal to white people. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard." That was his standard line on the campaign trail, year after year after year. But then when the war hit, he knew that he needed soldiers and he wanted to recruit the Black soldiers, but two, that wasn't even his starting point. His starting point was Frederick Douglass having conversation after conversation with him, trying to convince him to stop being in support of slavery. And it took Frederick Douglass to fight that fight and have those debates and discussions with Abraham Lincoln for Lincoln to finally be like, okay, I guess you got a point. Plus, if I do this, these Black men will join my army as soldiers and it might help me win, right? But that's not the way that the picture we are painted of Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln was super racist and had no interest in abolition, right? So the takeaway is, just because this is what we're told, it's good to like read their own words. It's good to do your own research, because, the media and power structures love to rewrite history in a way that fits really nicely in a little box.
Right. I guess one thing that stands out how you're talking now and writing that song is that you like to tell history through the lens of these iconic figures. And I was listening to these historians, Margaret and David Talbot, saying that the difference between this current time of social movements and the 60s and 70s is, back then there was this real emphasis on leaders and iconic figures, whereas now we think about hashtags, but the leaders of these movements aren't necessarily famous. What do you think of that development?
I mean, I think it's a really positive. I think two things. One, I think it's really positive, right? Because it allows more space for regular folks to feel empowered and to have like decision making and to be able to shape the movements, the campaigns, the work, and not just follow the leader, for one. But for two, the problem is that's not really the case. I mean, it is, but the reality is that space still exists for leadership, for sound bites, for celebrityism, and then that space gets taken up by sometimes a good celebrity or artist or a musician, but sometimes someone who's not so good is just trying to take advantage of the situation and promote their book or promote their TV show. And we need to make sure that, we take that leadership space away from people who haven't earned it and are just trying to make a quick buck, trying to get more Instagram followers, trying to get, people to go watch the next movie that they make, right? I think LeBron James is a great example. And I'm just going to say this from the very beginning to be very, very clear. I am all about LeBron James, 100%. Right? In North America, when it comes to top level athletes, like number one in your sport, we have not seen somebody as outspoken politically as LeBron James since Muhammad Ali. You're going decades, you're going like half a century. And I know now we got Serena as well, and there's other athletes, but LeBron was the first one to do it. Tiger Woods didn't do it. Wayne Gretzky didn't do it. Michael Jordan didn't do it. Larry Bird didn't do it, right? It was decades since we had somebody at the top of their game, any race, any gender, anything, from Muhammad Ali to LeBron James. So, and LeBron, he broke those, he walked that path first, and he deserves all the credit for everything he's done. The Trayvon Martin protests in the NBA, that was all LeBron, you know what I'm saying? Because he was in Miami at the time. The shooting happened in Florida. But having said that, it's good to have a critical conversation. And LeBron, like, trying to stay away from international politics, specifically Chinese politics, because when the protests in Taiwan came out. For those who don't know, there were student protests in Hong Kong. Sorry, not Taiwan. My apologies. In Hong Kong, and Houston, the Houston Rockets, the NBA team, has a really strong relationship with the Chinese population because they had a star player, Yao Ming, the first major Chinese basketball star player in the history of the NBA, played in Houston. They also had an international following before with Hakeem Olajuwon, one of the first stars from Africa in the 80s. So they have a really close relationship as a specific city and a specific organization versus the larger NBA. Daryl Morey, who was the GM at the time, now he's in Philly, but he was still in Houston at the time, came out with a tweet in support of the student protests in Hong Kong against the Chinese government. And the entire NBA, but also specifically LeBron James, was like, hey, I don't think we should be talking about this stuff. It's not our place to talk about, these students being attacked by the government in Hong Kong. And it's like, why? Oh, because had COVID not happened, a few months later, next summer, you were supposed to release Space Jam 2, and you really wanted to sell movie tickets in China because it's a huge market for watching movies. So because now, LeBron he's always said, I am that kid raised by a single mom from Akron, Ohio. But now it's LeBron starting his media company in Los Angeles with Space Jam 2 coming out, more worried about movie tickets. Again, LeBron all day, he's done so much work as a political activist, but it's fair to have that conversation, be like, hey, LeBron, you've done all this work, but now you're selling out the students in Hong Kong. Do you deserve this platform? How activist are you, right? So like, that's the issue with celebrities, because they have competing interests, especially, in the context of, of chasing, status and money in capitalism. And that's why, we need the grassroots activists who came up, not because they were celebrity, because they had an opportunity, a platform, but because they did the grassroots organizing work. Because we know those people aren't going to hopefully aren't going to be like, actually, I'm going to change what I have to say in my approach because I want to sell a book or sell a movie, right? So we need to take that space and hold it seriously. If LeBron can't hold that space the way that the movements need him to, LeBron needs to chill out and take a step back and let somebody else hold that space. But that's, we need to take that agency where it's our right as organizers, as the working class, as regular people, to be like, you get to speak for us, you don't get to speak for us. You know what I mean? And the way LeBron was talking, is like, hey, not cool. You know what I'm saying? You don't get an automatic platform. We want the old LeBron back. And we don't necessarily need the older LeBron because we could be building these leaders ourselves internally. So that's why I think there is a need to make sure that we build internal leaders, because if we don't, any celebrity can jump in, and even a good one can then all of a sudden turn because they start making movies. So, I think that's a much larger, deeper conversation we need to have in movements, as activists, as organizers. And I don't have a simple, straight answer, but I do think it's something we need to talk about a bit more, and how layered and complex those relationships of leadership can be in the modern day. I'm not even touch on the actual big one that you brought up, is in terms of social media and whatnot, and people clout chasing on social media and using activism to get more follows and to get more likes.
For sure. I mean, and I Yeah, it's a really long political conversation. I mean, I think the one sort of interesting counterexample I have is the fact that, you know, Lula was supposed to defeat Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil, and the second Lula's off the ticket, the same people who would have showed up for him don't vote for the other guy from his party, and instead of getting, you know, a socialist inspired social democrat, they end up with a borderline fascist as their president. So there's something psychologically alluring about leaders for some reason that pulls people in the ways some leaderless movements don't.
And I guess what I'm saying is we need to build as many leaders as possible from the grassroots, not wait for a celebrity to be like, I want to step in and be a leader, right? Like, let's build our own leadership. We see an amazing 15-year-old, we see an amazing 20-year-old, you know, a dedicated, experienced 25-year-old. Let's support that person and make that person, you know, our leader. And two of them, three, four, five of them, because yeah, we can't just have one or two. But I think, you know, we need to build from more leaders from the inside, and not just once we have one great leader, we're good. It's like, nah, let's build four. You know what I'm saying? Because
For
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm familiar with your work. I think we shared a bill once at a United May Day event, which is how I ended up with you in my social media network. It's been a long time since I've heard you speak, so I didn't know whether this conversation was going to be more politics or more music, and it certainly ended up being very political. So this leads to my next question. If you look at the career of Woody Guthrie, most of his songs are forgotten, or they're not very interesting because they're songs he wrote in the movement. They're songs he specifically wrote for political purpose. Do you feel that's what happens with most of your writing? You only write when it has a larger cause, or do you have this separate identity as an artist?
I think like at first, like I'll give you an example. When I finished the Labor of Love album, like I just want to. I want to do something that's not political. I've done so much political songs for the past few years, and want to do something. So I go and get a new beat, and we sample Sam Cooke, "Change Gonna Come." So I love that song, my favorite songs of all time. I love that song before I realized it was the anthem of the civil rights movement. You know what I mean? I heard at the end of the movie Malcolm X when I was a kid, before I even knew what activism was, and that was my jam. So like, we get the beat. I start writing about me being brown, being a dad. And by the end of the song, it's the most political song about anti-racism. But my starting point was I was literally trying to not write about racism. I want to not write about politics, but it ended up being that way. And that's like, I just used to always gravitate towards that. So now I'm actually trying to break that mold. So I'm doing, you know, different things. Like I'm doing non-musical projects, like, you know, monologue writing, you know, like one person play type stuff. And I'm just trying to do, you know, a lot more visual design to kind of get away from just doing political stuff, not because I feel pigeonholed, but just because I want to do more than just the thing I've been doing for 10 plus years, 15 years, right? So yeah, so actually Woody Guthrie is interesting because one thing I'm actually doing is, and again, COVID put a pause on this, but we were doing it, rehearsing a little bit during COVID online, and hopefully going to restart in person soon. But I started a band, just myself and my guitarist friend, who's also an activist, and we basically cover classic labor standards and political standards, like Which Side Are You On, Woody Guthrie. I think we got a Dylan song in there, and we're trying to like basically update some of these standards, and basically just be like, let's play this music in a pub, like as background music. But so even though it's still political stuff that we're taking, I'm taking a different approach where it's like these songs aren't meant for me to be front and center, like at, you know, at United May Day event, and everybody staring at me. These songs are supposed to be like as if I'm just a regular, you know, member of a band that plays Friday night pubs in downtown Toronto, and people can hear it, but they're not really paying attention to us. And I think it's really, yeah, like, so I'm kind of more shifting towards that. I still want to do my political stuff, but I want to do apolitical stuff. I want to, you know, really break outside my mold, doing, you know, non-music stuff as well. Yeah.
Excellent. So you were telling me before the interview you had another project coming out pre-pandemic. Are you ready to announce anything about that now?
Well, it was a single. So the Make Racists Afraid Again, which is the graphic on the back. So originally my plan was I'd started talking to people, and basically I was going to tour. I was going to drop a fundraiser on my birthday at the beginning of April, and then I was going to tour at the beginning of May, and I was going to tour across out west. And then once I got out west, I was going to set up a more like a very, very you know, basic 1 week residency. I was going to find a venue, do a whole week of shows, because that was going to be the Canadian Labour Congress Convention, which is the largest organization representing unions across Canada. And they meet every 3 years. Thousands of people attend. And I wanted to get all the activists in the room, because it'd be a good, few hundred people that are activists. And we always go for dinner afterwards to one of these events. And I wanted I want to be like, let's go to dinner at this pub. Me and others will be performing. So that was gonna be a whole week of performing in Vancouver. Before that, a whole tour towards Vancouver. Before that, launched the fundraising. And then after all of that, when the Democratic primary was done and it became the Democrats versus Trump, in this case, Biden versus Trump, I was going to drop the song called Make Racists Afraid Again, leading into my album release on Labor Day, because I released my other album on Labor Day as well. So the upcoming album is going to be Protest Music Volume 1. And all those plans, from launching the fundraiser in April, the tour in May, the single during the US election, the album on Labor Day, all of them got canceled because, COVID always wins. You know what I mean? If you're an artist, if you're a performer, man, like COVID wiped all those plans. I was turning down shows for like 2 years, like, no, I don't want to come to Victoria. You know what I mean? Like, I do want to come to Victoria, but not yet. Let me wait for this tour. Like, save that money, save that opportunity, save that event idea you have. I'm going to do a cross-country tour. So I've been literally putting stuff off because, the middle of 2020 was going to be my big year, in my biggest, run in a long time. And then COVID hit in March. I was like, you gotta be kidding me.
And this idea, I guess, of rambling around the country, of connecting to these different movements while you're releasing your music, is important to you.
Oh, totally. Like, I mean, so what I do is like, I'd rather stay, on somebody's couch than stay at a hotel. You know what I'm saying? Because like usually it's activists bringing me out, and I want to get to know the folks, you know what I mean, that are doing the work in Edmonton, doing the work in Victoria, or catch up with them. Haven't seen them for years, right? I think that's super important. But also even like outside of politics, if you're just a musician, period, right? It's like you want to get to know the people. You want to try to cut a record, even do some songwriting. When you're in town, I know you're only in town for 2 days, right? But you want to max that time out by not just performing, having a great show, selling merch and all that stuff. You also want to be connecting with the artists, you know what I'm saying? And getting to know them. If you're lucky, try to get to know the promoters too, but obviously you only get to know promoters so much in one night when you're about to leave. But bartenders, bouncers, promoters will all remember you, if you put the time in when you're on tour to really like appreciate them. It blows my mind how many times people get on stage and they don't say, hey, everybody, we should thank the bouncer and the rest of the staff because we're having drinks tonight partying because they're working and they have to watch us party while they work. You know what I'm saying? That must not be fun. We should be thanking them. Right. Tip your bartender. We can't do anything right now without the sound man in the back. And it blows my mind. I almost know, but like when somebody else does it, I'm surprised. I should be surprised. Every artist should do that. But also the sound person, the bouncer will remember you the next time you come to town, when they see you post on Instagram. That stuff matters, those little things. But the big one, like you had mentioned, is actually spending time with the activists, with the other musicians in that town and building a real rapport, a real relationship that goes beyond supporting each other off Facebook, but actually chatting, actually writing. You got the time, and the person's got a home studio, just try to lay a cut down. You know what I mean? That's just, touring 101. And if it's not for you, you should really rethink that because it really should be.
Yeah, well, man, this has been great. So do you want to play us off with one of your songs?
Do Make Racists Afraid Again. So this one does not hit well a cappella because one thing I really like about this, like I said, I really wanted to channel the times, right? So, I wrote this before Black Lives Matter was blowing up last summer. This was done in 2019. I was just waiting until the election to release it. I had no idea that it was going to be the summer of Black Lives Matter when I made the song. But I was just like, I more wanted to make the song to be like, yo, these racists are going to get really racist when Trump starts talking during the campaign. So this song is to be like, yo, chill out, racist. Not so loud, not so loud. You know what I mean? We out here too. But part of that was channeling that energy. So it's a very Public Enemy, Rage Against the Machine type beat. Bum, 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 bum. So it doesn't hit as well a cappella, but it will be out soon enough. But for now, I'll share with you the a cappella version. It goes a little something like this. We gotta make racists afraid again. MAGA hat racists afraid again. Gotta make racists afraid again. Fox News racists afraid again. First verse ain't a sermon. Its purpose is to service. Racists who asserted that they never would service. Saying every person in a turban is a serpent, making certain media serfdoms, making certain us serfdoms. We've been Plymouth Rock, El Haj Malik Shabazz. We've been Standing Rock, no pipeline on this path. We've been Willie Lynch, that's W.B. Du Bois. The lesson of oppression lies in whys and hows. Mike Pence in the White House got the kids in cages. Mike Brown got gunned down with no explanation. So with no hesitation, we the forsaken, for too long we've been waiting, so we here for the taking. Taking those who sit in silence to task, taking down white pride worldwide, taking down all Nazi scumbags, taking back what's ours, taking back what's ours. Gotta make racists afraid again. MAGA hack racists afraid again. Gotta make racists afraid again. Make those Fox News racists afraid again. If you love to hate, man, you're clueless. I don't hate the hate, fam, that's useless. I hate the hate that hate produces, because hate is abusive. So here's what the truth is. The truth is subjective, but if it subjugates justice, tool of convenience that's corrupted. And if you won't correct it, then yeah, you guessed it. The truth is, racist shoe fits, wear it. I got brown skin in the game. This ain't a joke, no fairy tale. The emperor wears no clothes. I can see it was for, but I can also see hope. I need y'all shout with me in support. If God put every racist in their place so they got no escape. Make racists afraid, make refugees feel safe. Gotta make racists afraid again. MAGA hat racists afraid again. Gotta make racists afraid again. Fox News racists afraid again. Tiki torch racists afraid again. Build a wall racists, anti-hate racists, make racists afraid again.
Very nice. I mean, I don't know where to begin other than I suppose I like the moments where you're lining up similar words, including the power of like Mike Pence and Mike Brown. I know it's just a common name, but even that was, you know.
Well, Mike Pence, Mike Brown, and White House, right? You know, Mike Brown, White House, Mike Pence. But yeah, like, you know, to me, I take writing really seriously, right? When I first started, the thing that I had was just an insane stage presence, like great energy. I had to learn to channel that and actually focus it. But I had to really work, especially over the past few years, really work at the writing, you know, at song structures and pacing. It's probably like, blah, 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 I'm just gonna rap, you know what I mean? And have so much energy, you're gonna love it. Whereas, yeah, but like, especially the past few years, you get a bit older, it's like, you know, I pride myself in being really meticulous with the wordplay. So I appreciate you noticing that.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, and I look forward to hearing the final version of that single.
Great, thank you. So on Spotify, find me Mohammad Ali, social media at Socialist Hip Hop. Zach, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Excellent, and I will be dropping all those links. Thanks for joining me today.
No, peace, love, solidarity, comrade.
Peace. So that was my interview with Mohammad Ali, the socialist vocalist, and man, he kind of blew me away. I mean, I should have known better. He's a key part of the Toronto protest scene, but he really just had so much knowledge to share, and as an interviewer, I didn't know, do I want to get into the weeds, sort of work out where I might have questions about some of his political theory, where I might want to learn more, or do I just focus on him as a musician? You know, there are really so many possible directions I could take, but it was just really a wonderful experience. Who he reminded me a little bit is actually the professor and public intellectual and activist Cornel West. If you listen to one of Cornel West's interviews, it can sometimes actually be a little hard to learn from him because, you know, he's dropping a whole syllabus. He's like, I think this way, kind of like this musician and this theorist and this activist. He teaches by giving you these examples of all his heroes, all the other great writings that have inspired him over the years. And it's kind of the same. Listen to Muhammad Ali. He's talking about all these great influences he's had, which is actually why it fascinated me that, you know, he's really committed to building a more collective movement, a movement that's built up of all the people and not of these great figures. But anyway, like Cornel West, it's fascinating just to hear him talk, but also I imagine like Cornel West, you know, it's most fascinating to get to hear the art. So go out and listen to Muhammad Ali's music. As he said, you can find it on Spotify. He has music videos for several of his songs, including Daughters of Asada on his YouTube, so go check that out, and please check out more of my work as well. I'm Zach Morgenstern. This is Ludwig von B. See you next time.